In 1970, the film that would become Carnal Knowledge was not a gentle project. Mike Nichols had made Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in 1966 and The Graduate in 1967, and he had established in those two films a reputation for working at a level of psychological precision and emotional honesty that the American commercial cinema of the period was not always prepared for. He was a director who used his actors rather than directing them in the ordinary sense, who found, in the collaboration with the specific people he chose to work with, the thing that could not have been found with anyone else, and who organized the films around what he found rather than around what he had planned. Carnal Knowledge was a film about men, about what men wanted and what they got, and what they did with the distance between those two things across the arc of their adult lives. It was an uncomfortable film to make, and it was an uncomfortable film to watch. And that discomfort was the point. Nichols was not interested in making the audience comfortable with the material. He was interested in making the audience honest about it. The casting of Ann-Margret in the role of Bobby was a choice that the industry did not automatically understand. Ann-Margret had spent the previous several years building a specific public image, the energetic, glamorous, magnetic performer of Viva Las Vegas and the Las Vegas stage shows. The image was not false, but it was a selection. It was one part of what she was, organized and amplified and presented. Mike Nichols was not interested in the selection. He was interested in what the selection left out. He had seen it in her, the thing that the image covered. The role of Bobby was not an easy role. In the structure of Carnal Knowledge, Bobby is the woman who is organized by the men in the film, and to some extent by the film itself, around what she represents to them rather than what she is in herself. Her interiority, her emotional reality, her private experience of the life she is living, is the thing that the film is, in one of its essential gestures, asking the audience to look at and to feel the weight of. It is not a role that rewards the kind of performance that stays on the surface of what is happening. It requires going beneath the surface, finding the interior, and making it visible without declaring it. Ann-Margret had been offered roles, in the years before Carnal Knowledge, that were organized around the selection, around the image, around what she was capable of doing in the specific, energetic, glamorous register that her early career had established. These were not bad roles. They were roles that made use of what was most visible in her, and she had done them well. But they were roles for one part of her. They were not roles for all of her. Bobby was a role for all of her, or specifically, Bobby was a role for the part of her that the image had covered, the part that was not energetic and glamorous and magnetically public, but was private, interior, carried rather than expressed, the part that the woman was when the performance was over and she was simply herself in the rooms of her ordinary life. She had known she had that part. Mike Nichols had known she had it. Jack Nicholson was discovering it in real time. Jack Nicholson, in 1970, was not yet the figure he would become later in the decade. Easy Rider had been released the year before and had established him as someone the serious cinema was going to need to account for. But the full weight of what he would do, 5 Easy Pieces was shooting concurrent with Carnal Knowledge, and Chinatown and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest were still ahead, was not yet in the public record. He was in the process of becoming, and the process was visible to the people who were working with him. On a film set, This kind of in-progress quality is legible to the people who share the set with it. Acting at the level Jack Nicholson was working at in this period has a specific texture. It is not contained within the scenes themselves, but is present in the time between scenes, in the way a person occupies the space of the set when the camera is not rolling, in the attention they give to what their co-workers are doing and what the film as a whole is attempting. He was fully inside the work in the hours between takes, not managing his energy or preserving it for the camera, but living inside the material in the total way of someone who does not separate the filming from the preparing for the filming. He watched his co-stars with the attention of someone who is genuinely curious about what they were doing, not competitively, not as an assessment of whether they were better or worse, but as someone who found what other actors did in front of a camera genuinely interesting, and who understood, from the inside, what the work required and what it looked like when someone was genuinely inside it. He was watching Ann-Margret, and what he was watching was not what he had expected to find. What Jack Nicholson said, as it has been recounted by people present on the set during this period, was not a long speech. It was not a formal statement of professional admiration. It was the kind of thing that actors say to each other when they are in the middle of difficult work, and one of them has seen something in the other that they want to name. The economy of people who respect each other's time and who know that the important things do not require extensive elaboration to be communicated. He told her, in the specific terms available to someone who spends their professional life thinking about what acting requires and what it looks like when someone is doing it at the highest level, that what he was watching her do with this role was not what the industry had decided she was. That what he was watching was what she had always been, underneath the decisions that had been made about how to present her and what to use her for. That the image, in other words, had been a partial presentation, accurate in what it showed, but incomplete in what it left out. He told her that she was one of the best actors he had worked with. She heard it, in the specific way that you hear something when it confirms precisely what you have felt but not allowed yourself to fully claim, when the external confirmation arrives for an internal knowledge that has been waiting for someone else to see it before it becomes fully real. She had known what she was doing with Bobby. She had felt in the material that she was finding something real and doing something real with it. But knowing this from the inside and having someone from the outside name it are different experiences. And the naming, when it came from someone she considered to be operating at the level Jack Nicholson was operating at in this period, carried a weight that she recognized as more than professional courtesy. He was telling her the truth. Film production at the level at which Carnal Knowledge was made involves a great deal of time between takes. The ratio of camera rolling time to all other time on a film set of this kind runs, on most days, at roughly 10 or 15 minutes of actual filming for every hour of the working day. The remaining time belongs to the crew, to the lighting adjustments and camera repositioning and sound checks, and the dozens of specific technical operations that must be accomplished before the camera can roll again. What actors do with this time varies. Some use it to stay in the material, to preserve the emotional state the scene requires, and to avoid returning to their ordinary social selves in ways that make the re-entry into the scene's requirements more difficult. Some use it to exit the material entirely and return to their ordinary social selves before re-entering when the camera is ready. Some navigate a specific territory between those two approaches, maintaining the texture of the material in one layer while operating normally at the social surface. Ann-Margret in this period was a specific kind of occupant of the between takes time. She was not loud about what she was doing. She was not conspicuous about the work. But the people who were watching, and Jack Nicholson was watching, could see that she was inside the material in a way that did not leave it between takes. She was living in Bobby's interior in the hours when the camera was not rolling, in the quiet, contained way that serious acting at this level requires, and that is more difficult, in some respects, than the scenes themselves. Between takes, on a particular day during the production, Jack Nicholson came over to where she was sitting. He had something to say. He had been watching, and he had something to say about what he had seen. The thing Jack Nicholson had said to her between takes on the Carnal Knowledge set was not simply about the role she was playing. It was about what he understood her to have been prior to the role, underneath the decisions that had been made about how to use what she was. He was not saying, "You are doing something new." He was saying, "You are showing something that was always there." The distinction matters. The first statement is encouraging. It acknowledges an achievement. The second statement is confirming. It acknowledges a truth. What Ann-Margret received from what he said was not encouragement in the ordinary sense, the sense of someone telling you that you are doing well. It was confirmation of something she had known about herself and had not, until that moment, had confirmed by someone whose understanding of the work she fully trusted. Jack Nicholson, in 1970, was someone whose understanding of acting Ann-Margret fully trusted. Not out of deference, she was not a person who deferred, but out of the specific recognition that he was operating at a level that she recognized as real, that his engagement with the material of carnal knowledge was the engagement of someone who understood what the work was asking for and was giving it, and that his capacity to see what she was doing was, accordingly, the capacity of someone who saw clearly. What he told her she already knew at the level of feeling. He gave her permission to know it at the level of fact. That is what the between takes conversation contained, not information, not instruction, not praise in the ordinary sense. Permission to be what she had always been. Carnal Knowledge was released in 1971. The film was received as the serious, significant work that Mike Nichols had intended it to be. It was reviewed as a major American film, analyzed by the critics who took American cinema seriously, and it remained in the cultural conversation long after the immediate period of its release. Ann-Margret's performance as Bobby was cited by virtually everyone who wrote about the film. It was cited as a revelation, and revelation was the right word, because what the performance revealed was not a new performer, but a different dimension of a performer who had been partially visible for a decade. The qualities that the public had been given access to in her earlier work, the energy, the magnetism, the physical and musical gifts, were not present in this performance in the ways they had previously been present. What was present instead was the interior, the emotional precision, the ability to convey a psychological reality through stillness and containment, rather than through expression and projection. The depth that the image had covered, and that the image could not have covered if it had not been real. She received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress for the performance. She did not win. The year was competitive and the vote distributed in the way that Academy votes distribute when there is no clear consensus choice. But the nomination was itself the kind of public acknowledgement that changes how an industry understands what a person is and what they are capable of. The industry that had organized Ann-Margret into the category it had organized her into was now in the position of revising that organization. The evidence was in the film. What Jack Nicholson had seen between takes on the set in 1970 was what the Academy had subsequently acknowledged and what the critical conversation had confirmed. That she was not what anyone had decided she was. She was more than that. She had always been more than that. The career that followed Carnal Knowledge was not a career that organized itself around a single dimension. Ann-Margret did not abandon the performing that she had done before the film. The stage shows continued. The Las Vegas residencies continued. The films that used the full range of what she was capable of, rather than only one part of it. But the conversation about who she was and what she was capable of had shifted. And it had shifted because of what the film had made visible. What Jack Nicholson had said between takes was an accurate description of what the film subsequently showed to an audience of millions of people, and what the Academy subsequently nominated, and what the critics subsequently wrote about and returned to in their assessment of what the decade of the 1970s produced in American cinema. It was accurate not as prediction, but as observation. He had seen it. And what he had seen was real, and the film confirmed that it was real for everyone who watched it. The industry revises its categories reluctantly. It prefers the categories it has to the complexity of what people actually are, because categories are efficient and complexity is expensive. Ann-Margret had been placed in a category, and the category had served her career well in certain respects, and had covered other things in other respects. Carnal Knowledge did not destroy the category. It complicated it. It made the category insufficient, and insufficient categories, when the evidence is visible enough, eventually have to give way. What Jack Nicholson saw between takes in 1970 was what the evidence required. It was what the film demonstrated. It was what the subsequent decades of her career confirmed. It was what she had always been. The full thing. The complicated thing. The thing that did not fit in a single category, and never had. He said it between takes, in the specific, direct way of someone who has seen something true and found the simplest available words for it. She never forgot it. Because it was the first time someone who understood the work had said, clearly, without qualification, "You are more than what anyone has decided you are."